Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time of lilies, lake fog, and softly sloshing boats. The sort of place where plants float but your footing definitely doesn't. You're standing ankle deep in the cool marsh water of Lake Texcoco, and the sun is already threatening to slide behind the jagged ridges far to the west. Mist curls around your legs. There's a strange gurgle behind you. It might be a heron, or possibly a priest, mumbling to the frogs again. You're not sure, and frankly you're not paid enough to ask. But you are here, and you've got a bundle of reeds in one hand, and a questionable idea in the other. Because you, dear listener, are about to help build a garden that floats no pressure. Unless you count the slow realization that if you mess this up, the crops sink, the priest yells, and your sandals stay wet for a week, and oh, yeah, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean, I'll be over here weaving mud into baskets either way. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little canoe drifts now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've arrived at the very edge of what will eventually become one of the largest cities in the world, Tenochtitlan. But tonight, it's quiet. All you hear is the occasional plunk of a fish and the flap of a heron's wings. The city is still growing, literally, because land is a luxury here. And when you don't have land, you make it out of mud and sticks and hope. Mostly hope. That's what chinampas are. Artificial islands built on shallow lake beds. But calling them floating gardens is a bit generous. They don't float like rafts, they're more like rooted barges of soil, anchored with patience and sweat, and about 6 different types of semi-rotting plant matter to start. You gather reeds, tules, to be specific, and begin weaving them into rectangular rafts, not too wide, not too long. Think mattress-sized, but bumpier. You look over and see another gardener using bundles of branches to create a skeleton frame. Over time, this will be weighted down with mud and decomposed vegetation from the bottom of the lake. You reach down, scoop up a fistful, and instantly regret the smell. It's kind of like if old socks had a baby with wet dog. Delicious, but it's nutrient-rich. That's the magic of this place. The lake isn't just water. It's a living stew of algae, silt, fish droppings, and minerals, all stirred together daily by thousands of squirmy things. Historians still argue whether this lake bottom slurry was intentionally dredged as fertilizer, or just sort of happened to be useful. Either way, you're knee-deep in it now. Your job tonight is to help construct the outer rim of a chinampa, binding together enough material that it won't drift away with the breeze or be stolen by your neighbor down the canal, who's definitely giving your raft the side-eye. You work slowly, methodically. The frame gets heavier with each layer of mud and compost. Once it's thick enough, you'll plant willows at the corners. Their roots will pierce the soft lake bed and hold everything in place, like pegs on a floating puzzle. This, you think, is probably not how most people imagine farming, and yet there's something cozy about it. Maybe it's the swaying of the water, or the way the reeds whisper secrets you can't quite hear. Or maybe it's just the satisfaction of outwitting geography. Because let's be honest, a civilization that looks at a lake and says, you know what? Let's grow salad on that, deserves some credit. You glance across the water to see a finished chinampa gleaming in the moonlight. It's thick with rows of maize, beans climbing poles, and squash vines curling like lazy cats. The trio maize, beans, squashes called the Three Sisters, and they work together like a botanical power trio. Corn for structure, beans to fix nitrogen in the soil, squash to shade out weeds. Nature's roommate system. But as you finish tying the last knot, something tugs on your leg. No, not a fish. A boy barefoot, smudged face, holding what looks like a frog on a stick. He grins and offers it to you. You accept it, because, frankly, declining froganistic feels rude here. It's hard to imagine now. But these gardens will eventually help feed hundreds of thousands. They'll stretch across the lakes like green highways, linked by canoes and causeways and gossip. Some of the floating plots will grow crops. Others will hold flowers, herbs, or sacred plants used only by priests. And somewhere off in the misty distance you can already hear the faint hum of drums and flute, signaling a ceremony that probably involves more frogs and possibly some chanting. One fringe theory claims that chinampas doubled as ritual spaces where plants were not just grown, but offered. That bit hasn't been proven, but when you see a farmer muttering to his corn, who's to say where farming ends and prayer begins? Your fingers are sore now, your knees muddy, your raft almost done, the stars are out, the frogs are louder. You stretch your back and wonder if tomorrow will be easier. Probably not, but you'll be back. Because something about this strange, floating world has hooked you. Maybe it's the rhythm, maybe it's the frogs. Or maybe it's just that even here, where land isn't land, you've managed to make something grow. You return before sunrise, the air cool enough to give your breath a little puff as you exhale. The lake is glass still, reflecting the stars, and the faint pink blush creeping across the sky. You step into the canoe, which creaks a little too dramatically under your weight and push off toward your half-finished chinampa. Every paddle stroke brings you closer to the island you're building, and every ripple behind you seems to echo back with the same sleepy question. How does a garden float anyway? Well, you're about to find out the hard way, because right now, that patch of woven reeds, mud, and soggy ambition you built yesterday still needs to become a functioning food factory. And that means more layers, more anchoring, and a crash. Course in aquatic engineering Aztec style, chinampas don't float in the way a boat does. They're anchored into the lakebed with willow trees planted along the perimeter. These trees don't just mark the corners, they act like natural rebar. Their roots spreading into the sediment below, locking the whole muddy island into place. Over time, the roots form an interlocking net of strength, and the raft stops being a raft. It becomes ... land, sort of. The Aztecs were surprisingly methodical about this. They'd drive long wooden stakes into the bottom of the lake, first some up to 30 feet long to act like tent poles holding up a marshy roof. Between those stakes, they'd lay more reeds, branches, and aquatic weeds, layering them with lakebed silt like they were assembling the world's messiest lasagna. You take a moment to poke your current chinampa with a stick. It holds. Barely. Now comes the fun part. Slapping on more mud. Not just any mud, those is lake bottom black gold. It's heavy, it's squishy, and it smells exactly like you think a mixture of old fish and rotting leaves should. You scoop it up with a flat basket, trying not to gag. Just a reminder, this is the same stuff that will grow your tomatoes later. There's a guy a few chinampas down humming a tune while flinging algae like confetti. He's mixing it with the mud because it helps bind everything together. Historians still argue whether this use of algae was intentional knowledge or a lucky accident. But knowing the Aztecs, who built an empire on obsidian and obsession, you lean toward the former. You spot a woman on a neighboring raft using her feet to stomp mud into shape like she's making giant tortillas. Her chinampa is clearly more advanced than your straight rows of soil. Neat little furrows for water channels, even a tiny wooden scarecrow with a smug expression. You nod respectfully. She nods back, then looks pointedly at your own wobbly mud pile. You get the message. But there's a trick: you're just starting to notice those narrow canals between the cheeks. They're not just for boats. They're part of the system. Water from the lake seeps into the soil from the sides, keeping everything constantly moist. No need for irrigation ditches. The plants practically water themselves, especially during the rainy season. It's sort of like farming in a sponge. Of course, that also means your feet are never ever dry again. You step onto your chinampa and immediately sink a bit. That's normal. Probably, you begin shaping the soil into shallow ROWs, digging with your hands, because tools are overrated and you've already lost your dignity to the mud. The soil is so rich that almost anything grows in it. You saw someone grow a chili pepper plant that looked more like a shrub. Another person planted amaranth that stood taller than a man and glowed purple in the sunlight. The phrase green thumb means something entirely different here, mostly that your whole hand is green now and still. You get the feeling the plants aren't the only things growing. These chinampas are slowly becoming something else, extensions of the people who tend them. There's a quiet pride in the way each farmer tends their plots, adds little flourishes, leaves an offering of cornmeal or flower petals at the corners. It's not superstition, it's style. You pause for a moment and look at your hands. They're covered in sludge, but underneath that, you've built something real, and it's not floating away. A fringe theory says that the Aztecs based the chinampa system on earlier Exocamilca traditions, but refined it to an art form. Some scholars even argue that the system was so productive, it could yield 7 crops per year on a single plot of land. 7. You try to imagine harvesting lettuce that fast and laugh, then immediately regret laughing. Mud gets in your mouth. You rinse your face in the canal water. It's murky, but cooler than the air, and carries the smell of lakeweed and fish. You spot a turtle slipping off a log nearby. You wave. The turtle does not wave back. Typical, as the sun climbs higher, the marsh hums with life. Dragonflies skitter over the water's surface. Egrets walk with that suspicious, tiptoeing elegance they always have. Somewhere in the distance, a flute starts up again, probably calling workers to Mercator to lunch. You wonder what the menu is. Beans, probably. Possibly beans on beans. Aztec cuisine didn't lean heavily on sugar, but chili, they threw that in like toddlers with glitter. By mid-morning, your chinampa is almost ready. The soil is shaped, the willows planted, the channels wide enough for your canoe to pass. You step back into your boat to survey it from the water, and for a second, It looks ... right? Not perfect, but promising. And that's more than you expected when you were ankle-deep in silt at dawn. You paddle slowly back toward the shore, letting the current nudge you along. As you drift, you pass by other chinampas, each more colorful and lively than the last. Some are bursting with wildflowers, others are reserved orderly rows of maize and beans. One has a dog sleeping on a blanket. In the sun, the dog does wave, and in that quiet moment, with the scent of soil still in your nose and the taste of lake air on your tongue, you realize you're not just learning how the Aztecs made floating gardens, you're living it, slowly, messily, but unmistakably. You're back before the sun again, rubbing sleep from your eyes as you coast across the mirror-like lake, paddles sloshing in gentle rhythm. There's a beetle on the prow of your canoe just sitting there like it owns the place. You nod at it, respectfully. This is its lake, too, after all. Your little chinampa is holding up. No dramatic collapses overnight. The willows are already stiffening their roots. The mud's crusted over just enough, and it almost smells like actual earth instead of fermented lake bottom stew. A small win. But now you face a different question. What exactly are you going to plant? Let's be honest, you came into this thinking corn. Everyone thinks corn. And yes, maize is the crown jewel here. Golden, tall, dramatic. The Beyoncé of staple crops. But if you stop at corn, you're missing the full salad bowl of Aztec agriculture. So you kneel in the soft soil and pull out a pouch of seeds. Inside are the true stars of the chinampa system. Tiny, humble-looking things with big stories. First up, tomatoes. Bright red, squishy perfection. You crush one slightly in your hand, and it smells like summer and sandwiches that haven't been invented yet. The Aztecs had dozens of tomato varieties, many of them smaller and spicier than today's supermarket versions, and they grew beautifully in this wet, warm soil. Next, you dig a little trench for beans. These are climbing beans, destined to tangle up corn stalks like they're rehearsing for an interpretive dance performance. You carefully drop the seeds in, pat the soil gently, and move on to Amarantha purple-green supergrain, with a name that sounds like it belongs to a fantasy novel, but was actually a crucial part of the Aztec diet. Nutty, nutritious, and sacred. Enough that Spanish conquerors later tried to ban it. You pause for a moment as you plant a cluster of chili seeds. There's an undeniable thrill in knowing these little guys could someday melt a man's face off, or at least make him reach for water. The Aztecs didn't just tolerate spice, they glorified it. Some records mention warriors eating chili-spiced cocoa before battle. You can barely handle the mild salsa at your cousin's house, and then the wild cards, squash, herbs, even flowers. You scatter some cempasúchil bright orange marigold seeds along the edges, not because you need them for food, but because they keep pests away, and they look fantastic. Plus, they're already used in rituals and festivals, especially the ones honoring the dead. That's a whole vibe of its own, as you move from row to row, gently pressing seeds into the soil. You think about how much strategy went into all this. The Aztecs weren't just throwing seeds around, they understood companion planting long before it got its own Pinterest board. Tall maize shielded the sun, beans enriched the soil. Squash blanketed the ground to lock in moisture and block weeds. You wonder who figured this out first, probably someone who got tired of fighting vines and decided to let them do the work. One quirky fact you overheard at the market: some chinampa gardeners used to talk to their plants, not metaphorically, full-on conversations. Grow tall, little one, or the ducks will laugh at you. That sort of thing. Historians still debate whether this was spiritual practice or early psychological trickery, but hey, if it helps your beans behave, who's judging? You squat by a freshly planted row and look over the whole garden. It's not big, maybe the size of a small apartment, but you can already see the beginnings of something meaningful. The corners marked by willows, the moist black soil cradling the seeds, the promise of food, and not just survival food, but flavor. You're building a menu here. Suddenly, something sloshes in the canal behind you. You twist around. It's a boy in a canoe, pulling what looks like an oversized fishing net. He's whistling and not paying much attention to where he's going, which is directly into your chinampa. You wave frantically. He waves back, doesn't steer. Classic: a bump, a splash. And now he's half ashore on your plot, giggling. You sigh, help him untangle the net, and notice he's caught a few small fish and one confused crab. He shrugs. They're not for eating. They fertilize the tomatoes. Of course they do. The more time you spend here, the more you realize that everything has a purpose, even if it seems ridiculous at first. Duckweed, great for mulch. Snails, natural pest control. Crabs, confused fertilizer. And yes, frogs, though you're still not clear if they're more help or more snack. You take a break under the willow tree, now growing tall at the edge of your plot. Its branches dangle lazily, brushing the water's surface like it's too tired to participate. From here, you can see dozens of other chinampas in various stages, some bare, others bursting with greenery. A few have scarecrows made of old cloaks and feathers. One even has what looks like a shrine made of maize husks. Whether it's practicality or poetry, it fits. Your stomach growls. You reach into your satchel and pull out a tortilla wrap filled with the up beans and chili again. It's warm from sitting in the sun. You take a bite. It's aggressively spicy. You pretend it's fine. Your eyes water. You tell yourself this is part of the immersive experience. Off in the distance, drums begin to echo again. Probably another gathering. You lie back, letting the hum of the marsh settle into your bones. It's not quiet. Exactly, there's the buzz of insects, the splash of fish, the occasional faraway shout, but it's peaceful in a way only nature-powered things can be. And as the sky turns hazy gold, you think about how this small floating patch of life is more than just a food source. It's a system, a sanctuary, a science project. And somehow, it works day after day, year after year. And just maybe, you think, with a little luck and no more canoe crashes, your tomatoes will actually survive the week. The morning mist is thick enough to chew as you paddle slowly across the canal. It clings to your clothes, curls around your ears, and seeps into your sleeves like a damp reminder that you live in a floating world now. The frogs are louder today. Or maybe they just have opinions about your tomato planting. As you dock beside your chinampa, a wave of satisfaction rolls over you. It's starting to look like something real now. Rows etched neatly across the soft, dark soil. Little green shoots already nudging their way up through the muck. But behind the peace and order of it all lies the real hero of this strange agricultural miracle, the muck itself. Time to get your hands dirty again. Literally, you step onto the spongy surface, squelching slightly as you walk toward the edge where you'll start the day's work. You crouch, reach down, and once again plunge your hands into the lake bed to scoop up more of that precious dark sludge. It smells, as always, like fermented algae and decisions you can't take back. But this is the good stuff, the sacred blend of silt, fish waste, rotted vegetation, and decomposed lake life. It's the secret sauce of chinampa farming. The Aztecs called it tlali, but you've heard the farmers casually refer to it as divine soup. It's funny how something that could knock out a small animal with its scent is also the very thing that makes your amaranth stalks stand upright. You haul basket after basket of it onto your garden, spreading it carefully, layering it with chopped up lakeweeds, duckweed, and even some leftover maize husks from yesterday's lunch. There's a rhythm to it now. Scoop, haul, dump, spread. Scoop, haul, dump, spread. You fall into a trance as the lake squishes and burps under your feet. You hum a little tune. It's vaguely threatening, mostly to mosquitoes off to the side. An old man stands in his canoe, flinging something into the water. You squint. Fish heads, cornmeal, no eggshells. He sees your confusion and shouts something about feeding the spirits in the water. You nod like you understand. You absolutely do not. Still, you remember that fringe theory from a sleepy conversation yesterday. Some people believed the spirits of the lake could be pleased with small offerings, organic, biodegradable gifts, basically, and, in return, they'd bless the soil. Historians still argue whether these rituals had any real agricultural effect or were more of a spiritual placebo. But the crops kept growing, didn't they? You head over to your herb row next, now dusted with powdered lime and scattered fish bones. Some of your neighbors swear by crushed snail shells, while others insist on burying a frog under the corner of each chinampa at planting time. You decide not to ask whether the frogs are willing participants in that plan. And then there's the sunflowers. Oh yes, sunflowers. You find a small handful of their seeds in your pouch and press them gently into the soil. Not only do they look gorgeous when they bloom, towering like cheerful guards over your little empire, but some Aztecs believed they brought protection. There are accounts of sunflower wreaths being used in ceremonies and tied to warrior rituals. You just like how tall they get. A girl floats by on a tiny raft, her face hidden under a wide straw hat. Her boat is stacked with baskets of dried duckweed. She paddles lazily, using a single oar. You watch as she flings the greenish fluff across the surface of her garden like fairy dust. She doesn't speak, just smiles. You smile back. You have no idea what you're doing, but you've definitely mastered the vibe by midday. Your arms ache, and your knees are covered in mud and tiny scratches. You take a seat on a dry patch, swig some tamarind water, and breathe in deep. There's something incredibly satisfying about the scent now. Earthy, rich, alive. Sure, it smells like a compost heap inside a damp cave, but it's your compost heap. You look across the channel and spot a woman boiling something in a clay pot over an open flame. She waves you over. Curious, you cross the narrow waterway, balancing on a log like a cautious duck. The pot steams with a mixture of water, crushed chili, and what looks like lake reeds. She explains, through thick steam and thicker sarcasm, that it's a natural insect repellent. Rub it on your ankles unless you like feeding mosquitoes, she says. You take her advice. You return to your chinampa slightly spicier than before. The plants seem pleased. Or maybe they're just amused. You plant a few more rows of ipasatan herb, with a strong scent and stronger opinions. It's used to flavor beans and ward off stomach troubles. You're told it also keeps evil spirits from ruining your crops. Double win. And just as you start feeling a little cocky about your agricultural prowess, a sudden squall of wind knocks your scarecrow face down into the mud. Rude. You right it, fix the feathered hat, and glare at the clouds like they just insulted your mom. But weather is part of the game here. It's why the soil is so moist, why the canals never dry up, and why you always keep your canoe tethered. Rain is both blessing and chaos. The Aztecs tracked it obsessively, offered prayers and sacrifices to Tlaloc, the rain god, and still got soaked anyway. Sometimes nature doesn't negotiate. The wind dies down just as the sun begins to dip. You sit on the edge of your chinampa, feet dangling into the canal, watching ripples stretch out toward the horizon. Birds dart overhead, insects hum, and the smell of roasting maize wafts in from a distant fire. You lean back, fingers digging into the earth you helped shape. A floating garden, you think again. Who does that? Who decides to plant dinner on water? The Aztecs, apparently. And now the day begins with ripples. Not loud ones, just that slow, shivery lap-lap of water brushing against wood, like the lake is clearing its throat. You're seated sideways in your canoe, drifting with purpose down the narrow canal. A thin mist clings to the surface like gauze, and the sky is that sleepy shade of blue that doesn't fully commit to being day yet. You're not headed to your garden just yet. No, today you're going canal diving. Not the dangerous kind, though you did once see a duck give someone a pretty intense sidey butt. The productive kind, you're after nutrients. Organic ones. Specifically, wriggly ones. You ease the canoe to a stop beside a tangle of reeds. You reach down with a wide net woven from agave fiber and plunge it beneath the floating weed mats. It's heavier than expected, thick with lake muck, clinging algae, and the occasional snack-sized eel. You haul it into the boat, and voila, chinampa fertilizer. Still squirming. It's not glamorous. It is extremely effective. The canals serve more than just irrigation purposes. They're like low-tech conveyor belts delivering the building blocks of an entire ecosystem. The water that seeps into your soil doesn't just hydrate it, carries a living slurry of nutrients, decaying leaves, fish droppings, dissolved minerals, the odd unlucky snail. Each drop is like a smoothie for your squash plants. That's the magic trick here. The chinampa system isn't just farming its symbiosis. You're not feeding your crops. The lake is. You're just the middle manager as you paddle back to your garden. You see another farmer dipping wide baskets into the canal, then flinging greenish globs of duckweed across her plot. It sticks to the soil like moss. The smell is somewhere between pond and pickles, but it's packed with nitrogen. You make a mental note to borrow that move next time, or steal it. Sharing is a thing, right? You reach your chinampa and hop off, the familiar squish of wet earth under your sandals, making you feel weirdly at home. You dump your basket of lake goo at the base of your tomato plants. It seeps in slowly, darkening the soil, and you swear the tomatoes wiggle with gratitude. Probably your imagination. Probably as you work, something slaps the water behind you. You turn quickly and fall, face first, into a patch of marigolds. Not your most graceful moment. You peel yourself off the flowers and peer over the edge. A fish, or maybe a particularly fat eel. Either way, it's gone now, and you're damp. Again, a boy in a nearby canoe snorts with laughter and tosses you a small fish from his net. You scared him, he says. Maybe he thought you were trying to plant him. You try to think of a clever response, fail, and decide instead to keep the fish. It's about the size of your palm and covered in shiny silver scales. Some farmers actually bury these little guys near the roots of new maize plants. You glance down at your corn stalks and raise an eyebrow. Don't get any ideas, you whisper to the fish. It blinks, probably in fear. Once planted, irrigated, and accidentally fish-scented, you take a moment to really look at your plot. The channels are holding. The willow trees are standing straighter. Your chili plants, small but fierce, have begun poking their first red buds through the dirt. You feel weirdly proud, like you've just watched your kid say their first word. And it was capsaicin. Across the canal, a group of women are working together to unload woven baskets from a canoe. The baskets are filled with a mix of herbs, dried flowers, and oddly enough teeny clay figurines. You raise an eyebrow. One woman catches your look and shouts, "For the festival tomorrow." You'd almost forgotten. Tomorrow's the rain festival for Tlaloc, the storm god who rules with thunder and dental issues. Seriously, some of his statues have terrifying teeth. Farmers bring offerings of food, flowers, and yes, occasionally frogs. It's the kind of ritual where it's hard to tell where gardening ends and divine bribery begins. You glance back at your crops. They've been growing steadily, thanks to the steady seep of water and nutrients from the canal. But you'd hate to anger the guy in charge of clouds. Maybe you'll tie a few marigolds to your scarecrow. Couldn't hurt. You sit for a while, dangling your legs into the canal, watching ripples spread outward. A heron perches nearby, preening its feathers with the kind of slow intensity only birds and bored people can manage. You toss a crumb of your breakfast tortilla toward it. The heron pretends not to notice. You pretend not to care. One of the most beautiful and baffling things about the chinampas is how invisible their complexity is. From a distance, they look like floating gardens on a still lake. Serene, simple, but down here, where the water licks at your toes and the mosquitoes, lullabies in your ears. You realize how tightly woven this system is. Every reed, every eel, every algae smear serves a purpose. The lake and the land don't fight, they cooperate. In fact, they sort of become each other. It's hard to tell where water ends and earth begins. A fringe scholar once argued that the Aztecs viewed the chinampas as living entities, extensions of the gods themselves. Not just land to be used, but beings to be nurtured. You remember the old man with the eggshell offerings? Maybe he wasn't so fringe after all. You lie back now, arms behind your head, listening to the quiet lapping of water. The lake sighs softly. You sigh right back. It's the kind of peace that feels earned and not bought, not borrowed. Just slowly built one muddy basket at a time. You close your eyes. You smell chili in the air. Somewhere nearby, someone is chanting in a low voice. Maybe it's a prayer. Maybe it's a very persuasive tomato song. Either way, you're not moving. The garden grows around you, even while you rest. You wake up to music. Not the soft, plucky kind, but the clattering, fluting, bone drum thumping sort that rattles your spine and tickles your ears. Somewhere across the water, the festival of Tlaloc is in full swing, and while you're still blinking sleep from your eyes, and finding bits of marigold in your hair from yesterday's face plant, the rest of the chinampa world is already ... dancing. You sit up slowly. Your chinampa is still intact. Sunlight dapples across your squash vines, and the chili peppers seem to be basking in their own spiciness. But today's not about tending or planting. Today's about showing off, because it turns out, floating gardens aren't just for food, they're also for status. Across the canal, families have transformed their plots into miniature altars. Some are heaped with offerings, maize cobs wrapped in colorful cloth, chili garlands, fish carefully laid out beside sprigs of herbs. Others are pure decoration, flowers planted into geometric designs, sunflowers trained into archways, even a chinampa trimmed to resemble a feathered serpent. You squint at your own garden. It's looking utilitarian, which is polite code for completely unprepared for this. You paddle quickly toward a woman you met once while trading chili. Her chinampa is always suspiciously perfect. Today, it looks like a floating sculpture park. What are you growing, you ask? Panting. Lilies, she says, and status. Then she hands you a bundle of Zemphoxakitl, sacred marigolds, and shoes you away. You race back, tucking the flowers along your canal border, wrapping chili vines around your scarecrow for flair. A couple of your squash blossoms are just open enough to show off, and you fluff them proudly like pillows before a houseguest arrives, because today isn't about what feeds you, it's about what impresses the gods and your neighbors. You hear footsteps. Not on land, on boats, canoes, floating visitors. The nobles are coming. They glide silently through the channels, their vessels painted with feathers and colored dyes. You spot one man wearing a cloak that appears to be entirely made of parrot feathers. You make eye contact with a woman whose necklace is bigger than your entire toolkit. Nobles, priests, record keepers, they've all come to inspect the offerings. Note which chinampas are the most productive, the most beautiful, or both. One canoe holds nothing but musicians playing reed flutes and turtle-shelled drums. Another carries a giant banner with the stylized image of Tlaloc, complete with his swirled eyes and jagged fangs. The moment the statue passes, a hush falls over the water. Every chinampa stops rustling. Even the frogs seem to pause mid-ribbit. Like someone gave a signal. Everyone kneels. You kneel too, awkwardly, into a patch of damp mud. The statue is lowered onto a particularly decorative chinampa temporary shrine, and the high priest begins to chant. It's a mix of poetry, agricultural instruction, and honestly, a little light guilt-tripping. The crops must grow, the rains must come, and Tlaloc must be pleased. Or else ... Well, let's just say the last time he got mad. Half the valley flooded and frogs rained from the sky. You glance nervously upward. Clear skies, For now, after the offering, the festivities explode back into motion. Dancers in jaguar pelts leap from canoe to chinampa and back again, drumming with their feet. Children toss flower petals into the water. Someone, somewhere, is definitely trying to sell fried maize cakes. You smell cinnamon. You also smell something that might be roasted lizard, unconfirmed, and then, as if summoned by the god himself, the nobles begin pointing at gardens. That's when you understand. Today is also a kind of agricultural talent show. You watch as one particularly elegant plot gets a cheer its owner has shaped their maize plants into a perfect spiral. Another chinampa has arranged chili plants to spell out rain in Noir. The priest raises an eyebrow. Approval. When their eyes land on your plot, you straighten your back and try to look humble. Your marigolds lean gracefully in the breeze. Your tomato plants, thank the gods, are just beginning to ripen into that deep red that makes people hungry and slightly envious. One noble leans in. He says. Functional, ouch. You bow anyway. The truth is, not all chinampas were created equal. While most were dedicated to staple crops, maize, beans, amaranth others were reserved for far more specific, and sometimes secretive, purposes. Some nobles used theirs to grow no-nettable plants, flowers for rituals, rare herbs for medicine, or plants used in sacred ceremonies. You once heard of a plot that grew only white lilies, and only for funerals. Another rumor claims a high-ranking priest had a chinampa devoted entirely to cacao trees, protected by guards. Historians still argue whether cacao was ever grown on chinampas. It usually prefers more humid, tropical zones, but you wouldn't be surprised if someone tried. With enough devotion and water, Aztecs seemed to make anything grow. Then there were the emperor's gardens. You've never seen them, of course. Few people have hidden behind layers of guards and ceremonial canals. Those plots weren't for farming, they were for flaunting. Some said they contained plants from all corners of the empire, collected like treasure. Others whispered that his chinampas had artificial waterfalls, elaborate bird cages, and even jaguars on leashes. Again, unconfirmed, but it fits, because here, a garden isn't just a patch of dirt, it's a statement. About power, about faith, about beauty. As the sun dips low, the nobles retreat, their canoes disappearing one by one into the misty distance. The music fades, you're left alone. Again with your marigolds and the faint, lingering sound of reed flutes. You flop onto your garden with a sigh. One chili pepper falls onto your chest. You eat it. You immediately regret that decision. Your eyes water. The scarecrow looks judgmental, but you can't help but smile. Today, your chinampa wasn't just a garden. It was art. It was ceremony. It was part of something bigger, something floating, growing, and quietly spectacular. And tomorrow you go back to planting. But tonight, you rest beneath the willows, firelight flickering on distant shores, and the faint taste of spicy status still tingling on your tongue. You wake to the sound of rain, not a downpour, just a polite drizzle, like the sky is testing its plumbing. Each drop lands with a soft plop against the leaves. The water, your forehead. You lie still for a moment, blinking up at the cloud-swollen morning, letting the droplets collect in the corner of your eye like nature's own brand of eye drops. It's almost poetic, you think, until a beetle crawls across your arm and ruins the mood, you sit up slowly, brushing mud off your face, and gaze across your cheek. The rain has already darkened the soil, and your plants are standing taller, as if refreshed by the night's gentle bath. You stretch, creak, and begin your daily loop, but this time, you're not planting for your own pantry or even to impress a noble dot today. You're planting for the gods. Not in that vague, metaphorical way either. You're preparing offerings. And not just any offerings, specific plants tied to specific rituals for specific deities, one of whom is known for throwing divine tantrums if his lunch is late. Aloic, Lord of Rain, Giver of Life, Stealer of Picnics, according to one old farmer who may or may not have been exaggerating, certain crops were grown exclusively for sacrifice. Not for food, not for decoration, but to be gathered, bundled, blessed, and offered on an altar. Or, in some cases, tossed into a temple fire, or even the volcano's mouth. Because when you're trying to keep the rain coming, a thank you bouquet of marigolds just doesn't cut it. You pull a bundle of chia seeds from your pouch and begin sowing them into the wetter corner of your chia. Chia wasn't just for Aztec smoothies. Priests often used it in rituals for fertility, rain, and renewal. Tiny black seeds with the weight of devotion. You spread them carefully, whispering why not, a polite thanks for the weather. To the damp air. Next come the white lilies, elegant, solemn, and often used in ceremonies tied to cleansing or rebirth. Some accounts mention priests wearing garlands made from them during high rituals. Others suggest the petals were soaked in scented oil and burned as incense. Either way, you treat the bulbs with care, cradling them like sleeping birds as you tuck them into the soil, a few rows over. You plant Sempolxakitl again, not for aesthetics this time, but for its ceremonial role. These golden orange marigolds were believed to guide the dead and please the gods with their pungent scent. You crush a few petals between your fingers. They release a fragrance that is equal parts citrus and memory. And then, you plant maize, but not your standard bright yellow corn. No, this variety has blood-red kernels, and you've been told it's grown only for rituals. Some say it symbolizes the sun. Others claim it represents the blood of sacrifice. Historians still argue whether red maize had any consistent symbolic use or was simply a rare varietal that took on spiritual meaning over time. You plant it anyway, just in case. You're not alone in this devotional gardening project. All across the canal, farmers are tending to their chinampas with the same reverence. You hear chants in the distance, rhythmic and low. One plot is covered entirely in white petals, shaped into spirals. Another features a single cactus, blooming pink in the center of a circle of corn husks. You glance up at the low clouds hanging over the valley. Somewhere, Talak watches a group of children pass by in a canoe, singing a chant so off-key it could scare away birds. They're hauling clay bowls of flowers and fruit toward the central altar platform floating in the middle of the lake, draped in reeds and ribbons. You remember someone saying that each offering is carefully recorded by scribes, who track what's been given, when, and by whom. It's like an ancient receipt system. You imagine one priest squinting at a scroll and mumbling, "Too many chili peppers last month. Let's mix it up." You take a break by the willow tree, now thickening at the roots, its canopy drooping lazily over the canal. The air smells of wet soil, crushed flowers, and faint wood smoke drifting from a fire somewhere upriver. A priest passes by, head bowed, murmuring to a small basket of amaranth he cradles like a newborn. You nod, he nods. There's a deep understanding in your shared mud-smeared faces. The lake gives, and sometimes the lake demands. One quirky tidbit you've picked up. The Aztecs believed that Tlaloc lived in a paradise called Tlalocan, a lush, watery afterlife reserved for those who died by drowning, lightning, or disease associated with water. You briefly consider what kind of chinampas might exist in that place. Probably ones that weed themselves and grow chocolate bars. You sigh. Your garden, holy or not, still needs weeding. So, as the drizzle begins again, you return to your work kneeling, planting, muttering half prayers, and full curses under your breath every time you find another slug. The act feels more meditative. Now, more layered. You're not just feeding people. You're feeding belief. You tie small bundles of herbs with twine and hang them from the corners of your plot. One for rain, one for fertility, one just because it smells nice. You add a few polished stones, a clay figurine of Tlaloc, with his signature goggle eyes, and, for good measure, a frog carved from obsidian. The priest this morning said frogs were sacred messengers to the rain god. You wonder if they ever filed complaints. As dusk creeps in, the festival drums return. This time, they're gentler, slower. You drift into a trance as you tidy your plot, rearrange your flower rows, and sprinkle a final pinch of powdered maize at the base of your red corn. It's not clear whether the gods will notice your efforts. But the wind shifts, the rain stops, and the frogs begin to sing. That might be a good sign. You lie back, head resting on a folded cloak, and let the sound of water, wind, and whispered songs carry you off. Your offering is planted. The sky seems pleased. The chinampa sways, and the gods, perhaps, are listening. The next morning arrives in golden slices. Sunlight seeps through the reeds and willow leaves, warming the soil in dappled patterns, flickering across your face like a silent alarm. Clock with no snooze button. You sit up, bones cracking like old clay, and look over your chinampa with a groggy sense of pride. The rain from the night before has worked its magic here. Tomatoes are shiny. Your chili peppers are audaciously red, and even the lilies seem to be striking elegant poses like they know they're being watched. You stretch, yawn, and reach for your basket. Today's not for planting. It's for harvesting. Now, harvesting in a chinampa isn't exactly as dramatic as you might picture. There's no scythe-wielding silhouette in a golden field. No tractor, no soundtrack swelling with violins. It's more of a crouch and mumble situation. You kneel in the mud, brush dirt off a squash vine, and whisper, "Okay, let's see what you've got, buddy." The squash obliges. You move carefully from plant to plant, plucking ripe produce with a mix of wonder and disbelief. This was underwater muck a few weeks ago. Now it's dinner. The maize stalks are tall and golden. You gently peel back the husk of one earful, symmetrical, plump. A real overachiever. You add it to the basket with ceremonial reverence. One chili pepper falls off its vine directly into your lap, as if it's volunteering to be part of tonight's meal. Bold, spicy, respect. Across the canal, you see others doing the same. Farmers balancing on the edges of their gardens. some singing softly to their crops as they work. One guy serenading his beans with a flute solo. You squint, is the bean plant swaying? Probably just the wind. Probably. Harvest days are like low-key celebrations. There's no parade, but there's satisfaction in the air. You feel it in your spine and under your fingernails. The chinampa system, this woven masterpiece of mud, roots, and willpower, actually works. And it works better than you ever expected. In fact, according to some modern estimates, these gardens could produce up to 7 crops per year in the same plot. That's not farming, that's magic with extra steps. You pick a handful of amaranth next, the tiny seeds glimmering in the sun like edible glitter. It's not just a granite, a symbol of strength. Warriors ate it before battle. Priests offered it in ceremonies. The Spanish tried to ban it during the conquest, which, as you now understand, was basically the historical equivalent of trying to outlaw broccoli, except shinier. You pause to sniff a bunch of epazote, sharp, earthy, and slightly rude to your nose, but essential for cooking beans without consequences. You tuck it beside the chili and tomato, a reminder that flavor and digestion are equally important to civilization. As your basket fills, you start thinking about where this harvest will go. Some, of course, is for your own use. Tonight's dinner is practically growing itself. But the rest, that's for the market you climb into. Your canoe and set off toward the southern canal, your harvest swaying gently with every paddle stroke. The sun climbs higher, glinting off the water, and the city of Tenochtitlan begins to rise in the distance. It's not looming, it's blooming. White stone temples catch the light like mirrors. Floating walkways shimmer. Canoes dart back and forth like bees around a hive. And right at the heart of it all, the Chinampa market. It's not a building, exactly. More like a network of floating stalls, some anchored to wooden poles, others drifting slowly beside long piers. You tie your canoe beside a man selling fish so fresh they're still giving you the stikai, and step onto a raft covered in woven mats. You're immediately overwhelmed by smells. Roasting maize, boiled cactus, flowers, sweat, even a whiff of chocolate mixed with chilia, classic Aztec favorite you still haven't developed the courage to try. The vendor says it awakens the soul. You suspect it awakens heartburn. You find your usual stall, nothing fancy, just a mat, a sign painted, with a maize cob and a small obsidian frog for luck. You lay out your produce carefully. Tomatoes in a neat row, chilies arranged from polite heat to call the gods. Your red maize goes in the center, a glowing centerpiece of agricultural triumph. Soon enough, shoppers arrive, some haggle. Others just nod and toss you bundles of cacao beans, the currency of the markets. One man tries to trade a clay flute for 3 squares. You accept, not because it's a fair deal, but because he plays a tune so sweet your beans almost sprout on the spot. You overhear a woman saying her grandmother used to grow sunflowers on a chinampa that was later converted into a shrine. Another vendor swears his family's herbs can cure heartbreak, but only if used during a lunar eclipse. Fringe theories, sure, but no one seems particularly skeptical here. In Tenochtitlan, myths and markets mingle freely. You grab a bowl of tamales wrapped in maize husks and drift back to your canoe. You paddle slowly now, heavy with produce, trade goods, and at least one ill-advised candied chili. You pass by other canoes, some loaded with flowers, others with textiles, a few transporting wide-eyed dogs that look extremely overqualified for their jobs as emotional support animals. As you return to your chinampa, the sun is beginning its descent. You tie off your canoe, settle under your willow, and unwrap one of the tamales. The first bite tastes like heat and rain, and everything your garden gave back. And that's the real reward, isn't it? Not just the food. Not even the trade. But the rhythm of it all. The planting, the growing, the harvesting. The way the lake gives and takes, gently but firmly. The way your hands, still stained with soil, now hold something edible. Something earned. The frogs sing, the water laps. The scarecrow nods in the breeze, like it approves. You take another bite and smile. You're jolted awake the next morning by something you never expected to hear in this watery paradise. Yelling, not war cries, not prayers. It's the distinctive, aggravated bickering of farmers mid-dispute. You sit up fast, probably to fast and knock over your basket of dried chili peppers. They scatter like tiny, angry grenades across the garden path. You rub your eyes and peek across the canal too. Chinampa owners are standing knee-deep in the mud at the edge of a plot. One is flailing a maize stalk like a sword. The other is holding a squash like a shield. There's a lot of arm waving and the occasional curse involving toads. You catch something about boundary stones and encroaching willow roots. Ah, territory drama. You sigh, stretch, and try to pretend you didn't see it. But deep down, you get it. Because as idyllic as the chinampa life can seem, lush crops, still waters, sunlit strolls among floating gardens, there's another side to it. A more logistical side. See, these plots didn't just organize themselves. Each chinampa had to be claimed, maintained, defended, and occasionally negotiated over. You glance down at your own corner, stones, flat slabs at each edge, half submerged in the soil, carved with symbols to mark your domain. Kind of like ancient gardening name tags, only they imply consequences. And yes, historians still argue how property rights worked in the chinampa system. Some claim land was inherited through family lines, while others believe plots could be redistributed by local leaders or the emperor himself, depending on service or merit. A few fringe theories even suggest chinampas could be temporarily loaned to temples or schools. A kind of floating land subscription service. You reach for your water gourd and sip, listening to the argument fizzle out across the way. The maize sword is lowered. The squash is placed gently back in a basket. Peace is restored. For now, you rise and begin your morning rounds. The soil is soft underfoot, maybe too soft. You notice a slight dip near the eastern edge of your plot. A sag in the earth that wasn't there yesterday. A quick prod with your foot confirms it. One of your willow roots has shifted. Not enough to cause panic, but enough to remind you that chinampas, for all their magic, are not permanent. They require upkeep, constantly. You fetch a woven basket, and begin scooping more lake mud onto the thinning spot. It's heavy, rich with nutrients and regret. You smooth it out carefully, like icing a very earthy cake. Then you plant a few reeds nearby, not for food, but for reinforcement. The roots will help bind the soil, hold things together literally. You glance over at your neighbor, who is now knee-deep in water, muttering to himself as he props up a collapsing scarecrow. You give him a sympathetic nod, He raises a wet sandal in salute. The thing is, these floating gardens aren't actually floating. Not exactly. They're anchored, built from layers of mud, reeds, and decaying vegetation atop woven frames, then rooted in place with willow trees. The trees' roots help bind the entire structure, turning a fragile raft of muck into something semi-stable. But if you neglect it, let the roots rot, forget to patch the soil, down it goes. You remember one story told by an old gardener with a fondness for exaggeration. A man who overslept during harvest season and woke to find half his chinampa had drifted down the canal, squash and all. No one stopped it. It just became someone else's problem. You walk the perimeter of your garden, eyes scanning for weak spots. A small crack here, a soft patch there. Nothing catastrophic, but definitely enough to keep you humble. You make a note to gather more reeds later. Maybe even reinforce the northern edge with a few extra willow cuttings. Maintenance is the part. No one writes songs about as the sun climbs. You take a break beneath the tree. From this shady spot, you can see how the network fits together, your chinampa beside others, forming a lattice of green islands divided by shining canals. It's not a grid. It's not wild chaos either. It's organic order, like veins in a leaf, like the circulatory system of a floating civilization. And just like any living thing, it requires care. You grab your canoe paddle and make a short trip down the canal to a patch of wild reeds near the edge of the lake. Here, the water is shallower, and the air is thicker with bugs you don't mind. You're here for the raw material of survival. Bundles of reeds and thick-bottomed aquatic grass. You cut them carefully, wrapping them into tight sheaves with twine. You notice something strange while you work. A structure poking out of the reeds low, almost submerged, with stonework partially hidden beneath moss and vines. An old boundary marker, maybe. Or maybe the remains of a forgotten chinampa, sunken after generations of neglect. You paddle close and see faint carvings along the stone, spirals, faces, water, symbols. You trace one with your finger. It's worn smooth, almost erased. The lake reclaims everything eventually. As you drift back toward your garden, a breeze picks up. Your canoe bumps gently against another, and the man inside looks at your bundles of reeds with approval. Shoring up your plot, he asks. You nod. Smart, better to fix the leak before the squash floats away. Back at your garden, you work, methodically wedging reeds into the soil, packing in lake muck, reinforcing weak spots with fresh cuttings. It's slow, repetitive work, but also deeply satisfying, like whispering to the earth, "I've got you. I won't let you fall apart." And as you plant the last reed and wipe sweat from your brow, you feel something settle in your chest. Not pride, exactly. More like peace. The kind that comes from fixing what's broken before it breaks you. The sun begins its descent, painting the canal with warm streaks of gold. The frogs are already rehearsing their evening opera. You sit at the edge of your chinampa, feet in the water, and watch a dragonfly land on a chilly leaf with the casual confidence of someone who knows no one messes with dragonflies. The lake is quiet now. Your garden holds. You smile, and in the stillness, you realize something else. This isn't just about food, or trade, or festivals. This is about stewardship. Your job isn't just to plant and harvest. It's to care, to maintain, To ensure this delicate patch of life floats on for one more day, you wake up to something rare. Not the croak of frogs, not the distant hum of flutes, not even the creak of reeds in the breeze, just ... silence. Which is how you know something's wrong. You sit up fast, scanning your chinampa. Everything looks fine, no floating chili peppers, no sunken squash, but something's off. The air feels heavier. The water is still, too still, like it's holding its breath. You stand and make your rounds. The tomatoes are where they should be. The maize stalks rustle gently, but the frogs, missing. Even your scarecrow seems nervous, tilted slightly to one side like it's trying to eavesdrop on a problem it's not ready to handle. And then, you see it just past the southern edge of your chinampa, where the canal bends out of sight. The water is ... changing color. It's not alarming, not red or black or bubbling like something from a bad myth. Just cloudier, thicker, with greenish clumps floating along the surface. You lean in for a closer look. Algae bloom. You've heard stories. When too many nutrients, especially from fish waste and decomposing plants, accumulate in still water, algae can explode in growth. At first, it's just a harmless green fuzz. Then it starts to choke out oxygen. Fish die. Crops wilt from below. The water, once your greatest ally, becomes a slow, smothering threat. You dip a hand into the canal. It comes out slick. Not dangerous yet, but soon. This could suffocate the whole network of chinampas. You glance up, scanning the other gardens. A few farmers are already peering into the water, frowning. One paddles by and mutters, "Too much fish rot, not enough movement." He's right. The chinampa system, as magical as it often seems, still lives by natural laws. Stagnant water, even nutrient-rich water, eventually turns against itself. Everything needs balance, flow, renewal, movement. That's why the canals were never just still moats. They connected, curved, breathed. Some even believe the Aztecs designed the layout intentionally to ensure circulation. Little liquid highways for nutrients. Yes, but also for cleansing. You paddle upstream, hoping to find the source. Maybe someone dumped too much decomposing plant matter. Maybe a dead animal is clogging a water path. Maybe the gods are just feeling fussy again. Whatever it is, you're determined not to let your garden drown in green gunk. As you pass neighboring plots, you catch murmurs. Bad water from the eastern side. They blocked the canal with new reeds, no flow. The lake's angry. You resist the urge to roll your eyes at that last one. But then again, you've lived here long enough to know, when the frogs go silent, it's best to listen. You reach the blockage soon enough. A tangle of half-cut reeds and discarded mats clogs. A narrow canal junction. It's not intentional sabotage, just someone trying to expand their garden and getting sloppy. But it's enough. The water, trapped behind the reeds, has slowed to a murky crawl. You hop out of your canoe and wade in. The water sloshes around your knees. It smells like compost having a midlife crisis. You untangle the reeds, pull free the mats, and let the water rush back in with a soft gulp. Within moments, the algae begins to disperse. Swept downstream like a bad idea finally getting called out. You return to your plot, exhausted, dripping, and proud. And also curious. Because this whole situation reminds you of an old story you heard once. A tale about how the chinampa system wasn't just a product of genius farming, but of trial and error, lots of error. Some scholars still argue whether the very first chinampas were created as a last resort. Swampy land no one else wanted. Too wet to build on, too soft to walk across. But necessity does something to people. It makes them bold. Maybe a family dug a trench to dry their garden and accidentally created a canal. Maybe someone got tired of walking through muck and started piling up reeds, and suddenly a platform appeared. That's how most innovations start, right? Desperation and stubbornness. One fringe theory you overheard in the market once suggested that early chinampas were actually floating rafts, completely untethered, drifting with the wind, until someone finally got tired of chasing dinner across the lake and tied it to a tree. You like that version? Feels relatable. Back at your garden, you take a long breath. The water's moving again. The frogs are back. One perches on your scarecrow's foot like it owns the place. Maybe it does. You grab your tools and do some preventative work, adding a few new channels between plots, clearing old reed debris, even building a tiny sluice gate out of wood and stone scraps. It won't stop another bloom completely, but it will slow it down, give you time. Later, as the sun sets, you paddle out to the middle of the lake just to float. No harvesting, no planting, just watching. You see the whole network from here, stretching out like little green rafts, laced together by canals and willpower. Some are crooked, some are pristine. All of them are vulnerable and alive. And that's what makes it beautiful. This isn't farming like you imagined. It's engineering. It's architecture. It's environmental management before anyone knew those words. A constantly shifting balance of mud and roots and belief. You don't just grow crops here. You grow the system that lets them live. You reach into the water, fingers trailing. It's cooler now, clearer. You smile sometimes. All it takes to save a garden is one unclogged path. You paddle back in silence, not the worried silence of this morning, but the peaceful kind. The kind that makes room for frogs and wind and the distant sound of flutes. The kind that reminds you, this lake isn't just where you live. It's something you're part of, and you're doing your part. The next morning arrives with the scent of something different, not the usual perfume of damp earth and sun-warmed chili, but a sharper smell, burning wood, mixed with something herbal. You open your eyes to a pale haze drifting over the chinampa fields like a sleepy ghost. You sit up and rub your face. It's not smoke from disaster. It's the good kind, incense. You paddle a little farther down the canal, following the scent and the soft rhythmic chanting that drifts with it. On a large chinampa wider than most, you spot a gathering. Priests in white cotton robes, their heads shaved except for a tuft in the back, stand around a small fire pit. They toss in bundles of copal resin, which crackles and releases its sweet, piney smoke into the morning air. You've stumbled into a planting blessing. They're not just praying to Tlaloc this time. The chants mention Exochapelia, the god of flowers, music, dance, and, depending on who you ask, the occasional plantain-induced hallucination. The chinampa they're blessing today isn't for maize or squash. It's a flower garden. You drift closer, trying not to interrupt, but one of the priests waves you in. Help yourself, he says. motioning to a small clay bowl filled with flower seeds, for beauty and balance. You take a pinch and paddle quietly back to your own plot. Once there, you pick a small corner between the chili and amaranth, begin planting the seeds. No rows, no plan, just scattered handfuls. It feels wrong at first, undisciplined. But slowly, the randomness begins to look intentional, wild in a way that makes space for grace. You water them gently, hoping Exochipili accepts uncoordinated effort. That's the thing about chinampas, most are engineered for function. High-yield maize, beans trained to climb, squash sprawling wide, but some were planted for entirely different reasons. Like love. You remember a story you overheard in the market. Two lovers, separated by family politics, forbidden to speak. They grew identical flower gardens on their respective chinampas, mirroring each other from opposite shores. At night, they'd paddle out, place flowers on the water, and watch them float toward each other. Romantic, definitely. Efficient, not so much, but memorable. Absolutely. Other gardens were dedicated to education. The calm, controlled conditions of the chinampa made it a perfect classroom for novice farmers. You picture young students fumbling with muddy hands, arguing about optimal chili spacing, getting distracted by frogs, and learning quietly, slowly what the lake demands. And then there were the sacred gardens. You've only seen one, and only from a distance. A rectangle of white flowers. No maize, no fruit. Just lilies, orchids, and petals, pale as moonlight. You were told it was tended by priestesses, maintained in silence, and harvested only during eclipses. Why, no one seems sure. Some say it honors the goddess Chicamcotl, others claim it's used in funerals for the nobility. Scholars still argue whether such gardens were symbolic or literal. But you, like not knowing, mystery fits here. You stand and walk the edge of your chinampa, feeling the air shift. The incense has mostly faded, replaced by the ordinary smell of soil and effort. But something lingers. A sense that today, your garden is a little more alive. You kneel near your amaranth and begin weeding. Not the glamorous part of gardening, but necessary. You pause as your hand brushes something hard. A small stone, buried just beneath the surface. You pull it out, and find faint carvings on one side, a spiral, a flower, and what might be a frog doing yoga. You laugh, probably a child's offering, or a very creative gardener. You set it beside the scarecrow. Let it guard the flowers. Later, a boy from a neighboring plot stops by. He's holding a basket of strange-looking plants, long stems, purple leaves, tiny white buds. Want to trade? He asks. What is it? Medicinal. My grandmother says it helps with dreams. You raise an eyebrow. Good ones or bad ones. Depends what you eat it with, he says, deadpan. You like this, kid. You offer some chili and a handful of your mysterious new flower seeds in return. He accepts, then points to the reeds lining your canal. You should check for mushrooms. The good kind grows in the damp parts after incense days. You make a note to explore later. Mushroom hunting in a sacred fog. What could go wrong? You sit for a while on the edge of your plot, legs dangling over the water. You see your reflection, mud-streaked, sun-kissed, vaguely respectable. Behind you, the chinampa looks different now. Still productive, still neat, but with edges softened by flowers. A little wild, a little weird, Like you, as the afternoon light slants across the water, you start noticing new things. Bees hovering above the marigolds, a hummingbird sipping from a newly opened bloom. The faint echo of flutes may be real, may be remembered, and through it all, the slow, steady sway of the lake. Never still, never loud, just present, like breath. You realize then that this floating garden, for all its productivity and engineering and ritual, is also a kind of art. A living, swaying, water-bound painting you build with seeds and sweat. And maybe that's why it works. Because it's not just about growing food, it's about growing something beautiful. You lean back on your elbows, watching the petals open, and for the first time in weeks, you don't feel the need to do anything. The garden can grow without your hand just. For a little while, the water will hold you both. It's mid-morning now, and the sun is climbing fast, casting long gleaming paths across the canal water. Your chinampa shimmers in the heat, squash leaves flaring wide, tomatoes warm and swelling on the vine. The wildflowers planted just days ago already poking out from the soil like shy party guests arriving early. But today, you're not working your garden. Today, you're visiting someone else's. You paddle lazily, not in a hurry, just drifting through the green maze of canals. It's easy to forget how vast this network really is until you start exploring. Some plots look like yours, practical, tidy, slightly overgrown around the edges. Others are more elaborate, lined with stone paths, archways made from bean vines, even little benches carved from driftwood, and then you reach it. The chinampa of the old woman with the blue cloak. You've heard stories, everyone has. She doesn't sell at the market, doesn't host blessings, doesn't trade, just tends her garden and, occasionally, lets a stranger wander through it. If they bring a respectful silence and maybe a tamale, you brought two, you tie off your canoe and step onto the edge of her plot. She's not there, but the garden feels alive in a way that makes you hesitate. It's dense, not overgrown, but layered. Everywhere you look, something is growing, but you can't quite figure out where one plant ends and another begins. Vines twist through maize stalks. Flowers grow in the shade of bean plants. There are herbs here you don't even recognize, curling and whispering underfoot. You place the tamales near a stone bench and sit and wait. Eventually, she appears quiet as fog, carrying a basket and wearing a look that suggests she knew you were coming before you did. She sits beside you without a word, unwraps a tamale, and starts eating. After a few minutes, she nods toward a pale flowering plant growing low to the ground. Know what that is? You squint. No. Spicy lettuce. She chuckles, almost kindly. No. That's Kakalox shittle, bone flower. We use it in dream ceremonies. Oh, you say. Like that explains everything. You watch her work. She doesn't weed in straight lines or harvest in neat bunches. She just moves, tugging here, tucking there, whispering something to a pepper plant as she passes. It's less like gardening and more like grooming a pet jaguar. You try not to think about what happens if you pull the wrong leaf, and then she begins to speak, not to you, exactly, just out loud, in a voice so soft it barely ruffles the bees. We used to think every plant had a guardian, she says. Every stalk of maize, every chili, you had to greet them before harvesting. Ask permission. Some still do. You nod. Makes sense. Especially in this garden. She picks a handful of something leafy, chews thoughtfully, then continues. There's power in what grows here, not just energy for the body, but memory, identity. The lake knows where you're from, what your hands have planted, what you've lost. You feel that. There's something about working the same patch of soil day after day that binds you to it. Your sweat, your scraps, your prayers, all of it sinks in, becomes part of the land. This chinampa knows her, and in return, she knows it. You ask, do you ever change anything? Move plants around? She gives you a sidelong look. Would you move the heart in your chest to your knee, right? Got it. Sacred plant map. Do not rearrange, she gestures toward the edge of the garden, where thick trees shade a ring of dark green plants. Medicinals, she says. Some for sleep, some for fever, some for ... other things. You know what that means. Love, dreams, revenge, the usual. Historians still argue whether chinampas were commonly used for medicinal cultivation or if that was a more elite or priestly practice. But standing here, surrounded by whispering herbs and ancient soil, it's hard to imagine not using this land for healing. You walk slowly through the rows, trying to take it all in. The air smells sharp and sweet. There's something humming beneath it, all not insects, not birds, something older, and then you find it. A patch of Tlixichetal black orchid. You've only seen it once before, pressed flat in a ceremonial codex. It's rare, difficult to grow, and deeply symbolic. Some say it represents mourning, others believe it offers protection. There's an old myth that warriors carried its petals into battle as a charm against betrayal. You kneel, gently tracing a leaf with your fingertip. It's cool to the touch. The old woman nods behind you. Not many notice that one, she says. Most just want the big, bright things. Things they can chew. You think of your chili peppers, flashy, dramatic. Spicy enough to cause minor hallucinations and feel vaguely called out. She hands you a small pouch for your garden. She says, inside are a few tiny seeds and labeled anonymous. Important. You thank her and make your way back to the canoe. As you push off, she's already back to weeding, her cloak trailing in the dirt like a banner. The journey home feels different, slower. The water is the same. The reeds sway like always, but something in you has shifted. Back at your chin. You kneel near the new flower patch and carefully press the seeds into the soil. Not for food. Not for trade, just because they were given. And that's enough. The garden accepts them. The lake watches, and in the distance, incense rises again, curling skyward like a whisper of stories too old for words. You don't plan to wake up before dawn. But your body has other ideas. The first light hasn't broken the horizon yet, but your eyes are already open. There's a chill in the air, a real, honest chill. Not the kind you pretend to feel just to wear your dramatic cloak. Mist curls off the canal in ghostly ribbons, and for a moment, everything is silent except the slow, metronome-like drip of dew falling from the reeds. You sit up slowly, wrap your cloak around your shoulders, and glance at your chinampa, and there it is, in the pale pre-dawn light. Something has shifted. It's not the crops there, as tidy or chaotic as you left them. Not the scarecrow, he's still slouching heroically under a willow. It's something deeper. It's the garden's mood. It feels Ready. So you grab your paddle and head toward the ceremonial center, the floating plaza where once in a while all the farmers meet. Not for trading, not for arguing, but for remembering. Today is the festival of the earth goddess, name that's fun to say and slightly terrifying in myth. She's not the nurturing leafy deity you'd expect. She's primal, huge, often depicted as a creature you must feed to keep the world turning. And today, you're bringing an offering from your garden. As you paddle through the morning fog, you pass other canoes. Some carry bundles of maize wrapped in white cloth. Others hold flowers, roots, or even little clay effigies. One particularly ambitious gardener has an entire sculpture made of beans. You raise your eyebrow. Bold choice. You arrive at the platform and tie off your canoe. The central area is woven from reeds and decorated with garlands bright orange, deep purple, and sky blue. Incense already curls through the air, mixing with the scent of wet earth and crushed marigold. You place your offering gently, a basket with maize, a few perfect squash, and a small bundle of the mystery seeds gifted by the old woman. You added a single chili pepper for flair. You couldn't help yourself. The priestess steps forward. Her robe is painted with earth symbol snakes, roots, faces with open mouths. She carries a bowl of water, which she sprinkles lightly over the offerings, chanting words that feel ancient and sharp. The ceremony is brief. No grand speeches, no fireworks, just quiet gratitude and a shared look among gardeners that says, "We're still here." You paddle home slowly, watching the sky bloom into gold. Back at your chinampa, you sit at the edge, soaking your feet in the water. The offering felt simple, but also right. You think about how far your garden has come. When you first arrived, it was barely a plot, just mud and hope, held together by soggy optimism. Now it's a full-fledged food machine. Tomatoes, beans, amaranth, chili, basil, thriving. You've added herbs, flowers, even a few questionable mushrooms. You're still waiting on that dream enhancement verdict. And you've added something else. To memory. Each plant ties you to a moment. The squash you planted during the week of rain. The chili that accidentally grew in the middle of your flower bed. The willow tree that leaned dramatically for weeks before deciding to stand up straight like the rest of them. Historians often debate, what made the chinampa system so efficient? Was it the fertility of the lakebed, the continuous harvest cycles, the integration of aquaculture? Sure, all of that. But there's something else they miss. Presence. This system works because you're here, every day, listening, adjusting, noticing. You know your garden's moods. You spot the first yellow leaf before anyone else would. You know when the beans are ready without even touching them. You've memorized the path of the sun, the direction of the wind, the particular frog that croaks slightly off-key every night. This isn't farming. It's relationship maintenance. You glance at your neighbor's chinampa, orderly, all maize, probably efficient, but no flowers, no frogs, no slouching scarecrow. You smile, to each their own. You spend the afternoon reinforcing the corners with fresh reeds. It's become a habit now, calming one. You hum a little tune as you work, the one you heard from that bean trading kid with the flute. Somehow it's stuck. You wonder if that's how traditions start. Not with declarations, but with earworms and repetition as the sun lowers again. You prepare dinner from the harvest. Grilled squash, mashed beans, and a spicy tomato sauce that may or may not make your ears ring. You eat beside the canal, feet dangling in the water, watching dragonflies zip across the surface like nature's tiny drones, and then you hear it, soft, faint, but unmistakable drums. Far away, toward the main temple, a slow, steady rhythm, not festy measured, ceremonial. You listen. You don't need to go. You've already done your part. Instead, you close your eyes and let the sound carry you. The drums echo across the water, bouncing from chinampa to chinampa, connecting each plot like a pulse through a living organism. You imagine the network from above, floating gardens like green stars in a black sky, each one tied to the next. By silence, sound, and water, the frogs join in. Your scarecrow sways. The wind carries the faint scent of corn, tortillas, and incense. You lie back, hands behind your head, and smile. You didn't build this system, but you've made it yours, and in return, it has made you part of itself. You wake the next day with a strange itch in your fingertips. Not literal, not rash-worthy, just an urge. To build something, your chinampa is thriving, sure. Your maize stands tall, your tomatoes smug. Even your chaotic flower patch, as your neighbor fondly calls it, is bursting with color. But something inside you says it's time to add, so you sit by the canal and think. More planting. No, you've maxed out the space. More harvesting. Not yet. You've got enough dried amaranth and chili paste to outlast the next 2 rainy seasons. Then it hits you, a pier, not just a plank for climbing into the canoe. A proper, decorative, statement pier. The kind that says, yes, I grow my own food, but I also know a thing or two about lakeside ambience. You gather supplies. Driftwood from the shallows, sturdy branches trimmed from your willows, reeds for binding, and some clay bricks borrowed from that unfinished shrine project your cousin gave up on. You begin building. Now, Aztec engineering wasn't all pyramids and aqueducts. Everyday folks like you were pretty good at practical stuff. Lash a few beams, slot in some clay. Let the lake level tell you when it's crooked. Historians still debate just how much of the chinampa infrastructure was communal shared tools, group labor, rotating responsibilities. Some say everyone pitched in during certain moon phases. Others think households worked independently, comparing techniques over tamales. Either way, today, you're going solo. Artist at work. Please do not disturb. The pier takes shape by mid-morning. Wide enough for a visitor or two. Stable enough for a reclining nap. And at the far edge, you plant a decorative arch made from bent bean vines. Extra sure, but that's the point. You sit at the end of it, feet dangling over the water, and that's when the idea becomes more than decoration. It becomes invitation. Because here's the thing, for all its productivity, your chinampa has become something else entirely. A gathering place, a sanctuary, a soft patch of earth in a floating city that never really stops paddling. The neighbor's kid swings by, bringing another bundle of his grandmother's mysterious herbs. For thinking clearly, he says. She says you seem foggy lately. Tell her I said thank you, you reply. Also rude. He helps you plant a small herbal corner near the pier. You name it, the thinking zone. He rolls his eyes, but keeps weeding. Later, a woman from across the canal stops by. She brings you a carved gourd filled with fermented sap, mildly alcoholic, questionably tangy, oddly comforting. You toast to shared soil and not falling in the water this week. You talk about things you never planned to, how she misses her grandmother, who used to bless every seed before planting, how her beans aren't thriving, and she's not sure if it's the soil or the silence she's been carrying. You tell her about the black orchid in the old woman's garden. She says she once dreamed of it blooming in her bed. You both agree dreams are strange but strangely useful, and as the sun dips low again, others join, not in droves, just one or two, bringing a handful of flowers, a bundle of maize, a clay whistle in the shape of a dog. You didn't send invitations, but apparently, word of a new pier travels fast. Someone starts humming, another begins carving into one of the driftwood planks a fish, crude but recognizable. You don't stop them. The garden, you realize, is no longer just yours. It's a place people arrive at when they need something quieter, something slower. A patch of floating earth where the frogs croak off rhythm and the scarecrow slouches just right. You pour another gourd of fermented sap and sit back, watching as your guests walk barefoot along the pier. One of them picks a marigold. Another leaves a small offering near your thinking herbs, a flat stone etched with a spiral. A match to the one you found weeks ago. Some things just circle back. Later that night, as everyone has paddled home, you lie on the pier and look up. The stars are scattered above the lake like glowing seeds. The constellations are familiar, though their names shift depending on who's telling the story. You think of how the Aztecs read the sky like a garden, to watching Venus rise and fall, counting days and signs, tying celestial rhythms to crops and ceremonies. The chinampa system wasn't just about land and water. It was a mirror of the heavens, a way to grow with the stars. You reach into your pocket and pull out one of the mystery seeds the old woman gave you. You press it into the soil near the pier. No label, no instructions, just trust. You pat the earth gently and whisper something, not quite a prayer, not quite a joke, something in between, like everything else here. Then you close your eyes. The wind brushes the leaves, the lake breathes, and the garden listens. By the time the next full moon crests over the lake, your pier is covered in carvings. Not just the fish, not just spirals, but frogs, maize, a perfect little canoe, even a tiny angry chili pepper someone etched with remarkable accuracy. You sit at the edge of it, feet swinging over the water, watching your garden reflect in the moonlight. The pier creaks softly beneath. You like its whispering secrets about everything that's passed over it. It's been weeks, maybe months, since you planted your first squash here. You've stopped counting. Time moves differently when you're growing things. It stretches, then folds in on itself like a freshly pressed tamale. You only really notice the change when your tomatoes are bigger, or your chili peppers are fewer than they used to be, or when your willow roots finally reach across the canal and try to shake hands with your neighbor's trees. Tonight, everything feels still. Not the bad kind of still, like when algae chokes the canals. The right kind, like the lake is holding its breath, but only because it's listening. You lie back on the pier and think about how many lives have passed through this floating world. The gardeners before you, the ones who first wove reeds and dreams together, and said, "Let's grow where no one thinks we can." The ones who watched maize rise from the muck and whispered, "We were right." The ones who taught their children how to plant chili without losing their minds or their eyebrows, and the ones who simply left quiet gifts behind, a carved stone, a patch of black orchids, a tale about seahorses refusing to work on Tuesdays. Okay, that might have been a dream. Historians still argue whether the chinampa system was sustainable long-term or if it required too much constant tending to endure through centuries of change. But here now, you think you understand. It was never about permanence, it was about rhythm, the cycle, the give and the take. The way the lake asks for your sweat and your attention and then gives you everything in return. Peace, frogs, weirdly insightful neighbors, and now it's giving you something new, rest. You've earned it. You walk the garden one last time, touching each plant gently. The amaranth sways in a sleepy dance. The marigolds glow like embered stars. Even the scarecrow seems content tilted just right. Arms stretched wide, like he's catching the moonlight in his straw fingers. You settle into your hammock beneath the willow tree. The moon filters through the leaves, painting soft shadows across your face. The lake laps gently at the banks, rhythmic and patient. Somewhere across the water, someone is playing a flute. Low, slow notes that wrap around your garden like a lullaby. You let your eyes drift closed. The frogs begin to sing, and the lake, for all its strange moods and silent wisdom, hums back. You smile. You planted something good here. Not just crops, not just flowers, but a place, a real one. One that welcomes people in, holds their stories, and lets them walk away lighter than they arrived. The lake remembers, and so do you, now. Just breathe. Let your shoulders loosen and your hands go still. Feel the way your body sinks gently into the hammock, like soil softening under a summer rain. No urgency, no tasks left on the list. Nothing but the quiet song of frogs and the hush of reeds, brushing together like old friends telling secrets. Let your mind drift like a canoe down a moonlit canal, slow, aimless, peaceful. You can almost feel the cool water trailing beneath your fingers, the weight of the paddle resting across your lap, forgotten. The garden sleeps, and so can you. The maize stands guard. The willow sighs above you. The lake, always patient, cradles it all. Inhale, exhale. Time doesn't move here, not the way you're used to. It stretches, folds, settles into the rhythm of something older than clocks and softer than calendars. This garden existed before you and will grow long after you've gone. But tonight, it's yours. Just float. Let every sound fade into the distance, the flute, the frogs, the water, even your own thoughts. No more questions, no more planting, only stillness, only breath, and the slow, steady rhythm of a world held together by mud, willpower, and love. You're safe here. You're home, sleep. Now the lake will keep watch. End of script. Sweet dreams.